Hello everybody, thanks for joining. Please check us out at avexa.com. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. In this video, I'm going to tell you about Python functions, why you need them, and how you can actually create them. Python functions are essentially self-contained script that does some sort of computation or algorithm that you want to perform over a large amount of data and reuse over and over and over, but only define a single time. Okay, so let's get started. What does that mean? So first of all, you have to define the function. So I'm defining, we'll call it my function. Notice the syntax. The definition followed by my name, followed by semicolon. An important thing to notice here is that everything within your function has to be a tab or spaces indented. So for example, I use tabs. So I write all my code here, blah, 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 blah. I use tabs. See how it's indented within the function. That way Python knows, okay, all this code here is contained within this function. Other people prefer spaces. They write their code here. Well, 4 spaces, oops. 4 spaces, write their code. Then Python knows, okay, everything indented underneath this function is part of this function. I prefer tabs. I think it's much easier and cleaner. But it's very important because when I first started writing my code in Python, I was I got into a lot of errors because there was an inconsistency between tabs and spaces. So I'd write one code here, and then in other lines I'd put spaces and write it. Python cannot handle that, and it won't handle that. It'll just throw the error and tell you need to fix it. An easy way to figure out whether you're using tabs or spaces or where the error is using this little feature here, which is a notepad showing all the characters. I don't like to actually show that, but just need to let you know that. So let's first just write a simple function. Okay, we define my function, and let's say we want to print x every time that we call this function, or print Matt. That's my name. Okay. Let's see what happens when we run this. Nothing happens because we did define the function. We said, okay, when this function is called, print Matt, but we never called the function. Calling the function is very easy. My function. So now when we run the program, it actually prints Matt. That's because the program passes this function, and then it sees, okay, now it's been called. Now I'll run this function, which means I have to print Matt. Pretty simple. And these can get extremely complicated. You can do all sorts of calculations. You can take in different inputs. And let's actually try something a little bit more complicated. Okay. So let's specify that x is equal to Matt. Okay? So now this variable right here, x, is pointing to the string Matt. Now I want my function to print x when it's called. So how do we do that? Well, first when we call the function, we want to pass through that x is equal to Matt. We want to pass through that variable when we call my function. We do that by specifying x within my function. Now, when we call this function, we're sending x, this variable x, over to my definition of this function. But how does my function know to print x? Well, it's going to take one input, okay? And it's going to print input. So now in my definition, I'm saying, okay, I'm taking an input and I'm going to print the input that's passed through my function. Let's see what happens. It still prints Matt. And you can notice that it changed without the caps, but that's because when I'm defining my function, I'm defining it's going to take some input and it's going to print that input. But right here is not when it actually executes. It executes here when I call my function and pass through this variable x. hopefully you can see that this can become pretty powerful, especially when you're sending large amounts of data through as variables. You can call my function over and over and over and over and over. That way you can avoid manual processes and only define your function a single time while getting output for over a large amount of data. In other videos, I'll show you how you can create lists, pass them through, and iterate over a large amount of data. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Thanks, everyone.